The Colts have finally found their quarterback of the future. Meanwhile, the Falcons just continue to slip into irrelevance and mediocrity by trading away former MVP Matt Ryan. Frank Reich must be a big fan of musical chairs because this dude just cycles through quarterbacks like it's nothing. He's going into his 5th season as the Colts head coach and has his 5th starting quarterback. Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, and now Matt Ryan. Ryan was a Falcon for 14 years, led them to a Super Bowl, and will go down as the greatest quarterback in franchise history. And it all ends for a single 3rd-round pick. That's all it took to get Matt Ryan. Holy hell, dude. I can't even tell you how frustrating it is that Matt Ryan only went for a 3rd-round pick when Washington gave up way more for Carson Wentz. But that's not the point of this video, and we'll get back to that later. The Colts were obviously in on Deshaun Watson, but once he decided on Cleveland, Indy focused in on Ryan. And the good news is if they wanted to move on next season, they easily can. Ryan won't have any dead cap if they cut him in the offseason. Atlanta already had to swallow an NFL record $40.525 million of dead cap for trading him. This finally signals that the Falcons are going to throw in the towel, and it is a new era in Atlanta. Ryan was drafted 3rd overall back in 2008, and he's been the guy ever since. 14 years later, the Falcons are back to square one, and they just signed Marcus Mariota as a bridge quarterback. Ryan was a 4-time Pro Bowler and won an MVP, but I think we all know what he's going to be known for, the 28-3 blown lead in the Super Bowl. The Falcons blew it, and it feels like the entire franchise has crumbled since that moment, and Ryan is the last domino to fall after Julio Jones got traded and Dan Quinn was fired. For the Colts, the roster's still good, but the mission remains the same it has been since the abrupt retirement of Andrew Luck. Find a starting quarterback. It's probably safe to say that a 37-year-old isn't going to be the long-term answer in Indy, but he does work for now, and that's all that really matters. I still can't get over the fact of just how much it feels like the franchise changed because of that loss in the Super Bowl to Tom Brady and the Patriots. If they win that game, all of a sudden Matt Ryan is an MVP and a Super Bowl champ. Dan Quinn wins a Super Bowl. Julio Jones wins a Super Bowl, and it feels like maybe that whole core kind of stays together. Instead, they were so beaten up after the comeback. It's all they heard about, and they ended up just falling apart as a franchise, as a team, and everybody just kind of slowly went away. And it feels like because of that loss, all this happened earlier than it should have. And maybe the Falcons were a good contender that could have won maybe another Super Bowl or really contended in the NFC for a couple more years. Instead, they all broke apart, and Matt Ryan kind of feels like the last piece that's finally gone from the puzzle. Ryan's stats obviously have diminished in the last year or two, but if you look at the Falcons, I don't think it's that surprising. Remember, you traded away Julio Jones. You really didn't have Calvin Ridley for much of last year. The offensive line is horrible. The Falcons have a terrible, terrible offensive line. They don't have any good weapons. It makes sense why Ryan has struggled so much, and I think it's good to see that the Falcons are finally committing to, hey, we need to actually rebuild. This is not getting the job done. It's time to start back over, figure this out from scratch, and stop holding on to Matt Ryan. The Marcus Mariota signing makes a ton of sense for the Falcons. I think he's actually going to be a really good duct tape bridge type quarterback, just kind of help you get to the next spot. I think maybe just with how high of a draft pick the Falcons have, they are going to go for a quarterback potentially. Maybe you want to go after a Kenny Pickett or a Malik Willis, have him sit behind Marcus Mariota. Maybe Malik Willis probably fits that kind of archetype a little bit better, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons are taking a quarterback next month. Plus, Marcus Mariota already knows Arthur Smith from when they were together in Tennessee, so there's already a previous relationship there, and maybe they can figure it out together this time. For Matt Ryan, I think he really wins this trade. He's going from a really bad football team to a pretty good football team in the Colts. Yeah, they still have some stuff to figure out, but for the most part, this is a huge upgrade for him. Looking at the Colts, this was a team that was a perennial contender. They looked like a really good football team. It looked like they had everything figured out, and then Andrew Luck just abruptly retired out of nowhere, and ever since, they've kind of been a mess. They've been trying to find that quarterback, and they've tried a bunch of different people. It just hasn't worked, and some of them kind of worked for a little bit. Carson Wentz started off last year kind of hot. Phillip Rivers had his moments, but at the end of the day, they're still looking for that starting quarterback, and maybe an old Matt Ryan in a win-now desperation mode for a ring is the right answer. For Ryan, now he gets to go play behind a pretty solid offensive line. Yeah, they have some holes. They need to figure out left tackle and right guard, but any line that has Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson immediately immediately is going to be better than whatever the hell the Falcons were throwing out there last year in front of Matt. I think one of my concerns is how little weapons Matt Ryan's actually going to have. Yeah, Michael Pittman's a pretty solid wide receiver. I like him a lot. I think he could maybe even break out with Matt Ryan, but you got to find somebody else. And whether or not you're taking, a wide receiver at the draft in the second round or whatever it may be, they need to figure out the wide receiver position. They need to get more weapons in there and get somebody for Matt Ryan to throw the ball to. Because at least right now you have Jonathan Taylor at running back and you still do have Michael Pittman, but you still have a lot of holes to fill. I think it's obvious that Matt Ryan is an upgrade over Carson Wentz, but I do wonder by how much. It's hard to see how much Matt Ryan has kind of deteriorated in the last couple of years. It's hard to say, how much of this can we blame on age? How much of this can we blame on not really having the same weapons? No Ridley, no Julio, and you didn't really use Kyle Pitts. The way the offense was maneuvered last year with Kyle Pitts was awful. He should have had more than one touchdown. That's a disgrace the way he was used, but there's still a lot of things to figure out and Matt Ryan now has a chance to prove himself. The fact that they were able to get him for only a third-round pick, I think is huge, and I think you got to give a big kudos to the Colts. For Carson Wentz, they were able to get rid of Carson Wentz and in return get a third-round pick and another third-round pick that could turn into a second-round pick if Wentz plays 70% of the snaps in Washington. So that is huge to only give up a third for Matt Ryan. So they were able to essentially trade Carson Wentz for Matt Ryan and get back more picks as compensation. At the end of the day, no one's actually going to care what they traded away for Matt Ryan if he ends up balling out. And if Carson Wentz goes to Washington and balls out, no one's going to care about that compensation now. I don't hear anybody right now complaining about what the Rams gave up for Matthew Stafford because now they all have a ring on their finger. No, I definitely don't think Matt Ryan is going to end his career with a ring because I definitely don't think it's going to come in Indianapolis, but at the bare minimum, I'm going to be rooting for it.